that we are in a virtual environment. You're nice and cozy in your homes, and good to kick this off. So I'm wondering, Chairman Harrison, I didn't get a chance to talk to you about because this popped into my head 15 minutes ago. If we could just take a quick little pause right here and just take feedback from last night. I certainly can summarize it. I guess I can summarize it, but we'd just love to hear some feedback from members regarding last night's presentation. And, thoughts, what went well, what didn't go well on the presentation, what questions you have. That'll help us kind of frame this out tonight as we're going through. Not necessarily the questions about the program details. We're going to get to all that and we'll work through that one by one, but just more kind of overall in general. So I guess if I summarize for those of you who weren't there, very productive meeting last night. Council, my gauge of their reactions and the feedback I received last night and today was they greatly appreciated the opportunity to see our budget in front of them. They felt very comfortable with, I think, the concepts we were talking about, none of which were essentially new or ground changing with the exception of the woodland revenues. They certainly embraced, I believe, the understanding of that we've put a budget together to them that has done our best to create a realistic number that our town can fund. They certainly noted the efforts made, both the inclusion of the grants and all the work on there, as well as the structural prepays that we've done regarding OPEB and the $900,000 prepay. And I think a pretty resounding sense of approval towards the position adds regarding the EL positions that we added in. So I left the meeting feeling optimistic, and I left the meeting with a sense of continued collaboration of where we're going ultimately. So love to hear your feedback and thoughts and questions you might have had.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I appreciated the overview and, the details around Woodland schools. I think, a lot of the community is used to, that school being funded, that funding some of our shortfalls in our budget. And I appreciate that, we're showing them an actual number, right? We're going to show you at 55 versus 85 students. So I think that for me, that resonated. I think from speaking to some of the council members that, wow, we see that, one thing that the pandemic showed us is that other communities decided that let's build our own schools. Or for me, I was always wondering, did those kids in those communities get left behind because the districts don't want to pay or fund these type of this Woodland schools were sending their students to our schools? Did those communities leave them behind? Because at one point, remember, there was an influx, there was a waiting list, and now the pandemic happened, and people are just, I guess, doing it on their own. But I appreciate it, that the details around that, helping everyone understand, like, this is the reality that we're in right now.
Yeah. I wanted to note too, I'm sure you saw the banner on top of your screen. We are recording this meeting, so be on your absolute best behavior. But it's a requirement of virtual meetings with the new legislation that we do record them, so this meeting's being recorded. Other thought, thank you for that, Taran. That's helpful. And yeah, I think that's all of our kind of learnings, and the questions you asked are the same questions we're asking right now. Other thoughts, really also interested in like big things you want to talk about tonight, big detail things before we get to the granular side.
Well, I was concerned with the Woodland School and the money that comes in through Woodland School, and us not being able to get what we need to bring it back up to the $5 million, the $6 million that we usually brought in. I just think that there's something in programming that has to be special that we have that nobody else has that will bring it in. I don't know or can't imagine what that program could be or would be, but I think that that's what we need to get us back to that, to that place. Also, is the ARPA, how long is the ARPA given to us? Because I'm concerned about that, grants and people's salaries being put on the grants, because we know what happened before. When it goes away, they have to go away too. So
Yeah.
How long is like ARPA?
So 2025. 2025.
Fiscal 25. So this budget we're looking at right now for fiscal 24 is the last budget that we're able to positively use ARPA dollars for.
Mhm. So, and I didn't know there was some magnet schools that we did not pay tuition for. Which ones are those?
All the open choice schools in Hartford,
You correct?
primarily.
Like, that's, no?
Hartford Public Schools, magnet schools, with the exception of Great Path Academy, which is a
Oh.
Hartford school, we pay tuition to that school. The other ones, we do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one more thing that as far as the electronic buses, do y'all see what they showed us on TV about them catching on fire? So
I didn't see
that's
that.
like, huh?
I didn't see that, no.
No, the electric cars, they showed us that they can catch on fire at any time. So I'm just trying to understand what it would be more of a liability having those kids on the bus, electric buses, and it happens like that. That's negative thinking, but I think it's more precautionary thinking.
Yeah, I think that's an evolving technology, and I think we're gonna learn a lot more about that as it moves through.
Yeah.
As far as your comment around Woodland and programming and how do we bring it back, we couldn't agree more, and we're trying to find that thing. So I think that's another good insight and good feedback that's what stuck out to you. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good. I actually like those these meetings, the first meeting. But the question that I have is okay around Rich Kehoe's. Actually, he seemed much more positive this time around than the last time, but the increase in the 2.3%, I'm not sure if I think we still have to. What it sounded like to me was we still have to kind of prove, why we need that increase in the budget. But I think his response was, from what I understand, was more positive this time than last time. And then I have a concern too regarding the Alliance grant, and that's still, I don't know. That's still, in my head, and that's the grant that we're moving all those salaries into. Correct? It's the Alliance grant.
Correct.
So yeah, so I have a concern regarding that.
Yeah, both good insights. I would agree with your insight on Chairman Kehoe's response. I did feel that was a favorable response. Obviously, of having worked closely with him for so many years, and you can kind of gauge that. I thought the same thing, but I think your words of we still have work to do is until the council approves a budget for us, there should be nothing taken for granted. So there's a constant work for us on that end. In terms of the Alliance grant, we continue to talk about this. I thought Ben did a really nice job with that last night of kind of articulating how he originally felt and how he's growing to feel. I tried to articulate a little bit of, Alliance is ECS, and there is a phase-in formula for the ECS grants, of which there is no formula for any other grant as far as an increase pointed. So there's an advantage there. And I would say you should have the concern you have, but you're not concerned, for example, about the large number of teachers who are in our ECS grant because you expect that. So I would kind of say, if you're not concerned about the ECS grant, then that should somewhat assuage some of your concerns around Alliance, because they are the same dollars. They are the same concept item from the State Department. If you said, Nate, are you 100% sure on that? Well, of course I couldn't be 100% sure on that, because anything that says grant after it, we know what GRA and T means. So it's a good question, Vanessa. I don't think we're going to be able to answer that question with definitive nature, but you're not asking for that. You're just voicing a concern, and it's a valid concern.
How many other districts are starting programs like Woodland? Do we know?
Sharon, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question, Marilyn. Just the state of Connecticut Bureau of Special Education has encouraged each district to develop more programs to keep their children in their own community. So I could use New Britain as an example. They have built a 3-tiered system within their own district to support the needs of children with significant needs. They still do refer students to us, but those are typically students that are more behaviorally challenged. They may have incurred several disciplinary incidences. So it's a different type of student that we're starting to see being referred. We have interest from one of our communities in accepting students who've been expelled. As you all know, we have our own program located at Woodland, our own educational opportunity at Woodland for expelled students. So thinking about the future and what direction we might go in, I think there are lots of areas that we can explore, but the reality is that just about each district has developed some type of a program to keep their students in district. If I could just add, though, one of the other realities coming out of the pandemic, what districts learned is that many children with significant needs are responsive to online learning. And so through the PPT process, that's one of the only ways that you can implement synchronous learning for a student is through the PPT process. And there are districts, several actually, that have some of their students with significant needs receiving their programming online. So that is having an impact on us as well.
I think the other eye-opening piece, and we're going to talk more about Woodland later tonight, but is that to realize the value of each tuition placement at Woodland. When you're talking students in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, we're at 59 students. Our target to get to right now is 67. You're like, oh, that's nothing. That's 8 away. 8 away is in the millions of dollars of revenue. So each one of these is significant. So if one district finds a way to do this, not needing us, this is a big deal. And this is why Doris's point is a good point. We have to be nuanced, different, and attractive in a competitive market. And, we have a ways to go at Woodland School to get to that. So this is good. Good feedback for us. We can jump into the presentation here and we'll get moving here. Tonight is, I'm with Vanessa. I enjoy the opportunity to present to the council and with the council. And I particularly enjoy the high level overview because I get to do it. Tonight, we get to work with all of our cabinet team members, and I'm really grateful for them being here, and each of them are going to have a role tonight. I'd be remiss not to talk about this. I'm not going to go into a long diatribe. I will spare you tonight. But again, keeping that vision front and center of where we're going and why we're doing this is the work. And as we talk about dollars and cents, let's talk about quality learning opportunities for kids. So tonight, we're going to review each one of the details from the program superintendent's budget. Back in the day, this is when we, in a less technical world, we were flipping feverishly through pages, etc. We no longer are doing that. We're going to flip through pages virtually for you. You have your book at home. I'm hoping you have notes in your book that you're going to be working to. And this is where our board has always done the due diligence to understanding the budget on a line-by-line basis so that you can ultimately support and commit to this budget. Of course, Ben's going to take us through kind of the big narrative, the roadmap. Each one of these things is kind of set up the same way. Each cabinet member is going to be talking about the programs they oversee. And we're going to talk about, starting off, we're going to talk about navigating the board budget book. And Ben's going to take us through some things on that. And then we're just going to jump into these individual program details and look at the variance, which variance is the delta or the change between last year's budget and fiscal year 24 budget. I think it's probably a good idea for us to put questions and answers after every program. I know we have it listed here in the agenda that we're going to do questions and answers then. Certainly we could do it then too. But, Ben will present all the programs in operation and finance, for example. We'll pause right there and then we can answer all the questions about that. So that might be a good sequencing for your questions so you don't have to sit on a question too long. And, if we've missed something, then we can come back to it and work through it. But this is meant to be more of an informal conversation driving from here. So looking forward to tonight and looking forward to the dialogue that ensues.
So important to note for tonight, you do not need your budget book in front of you. So what we're going to do is when we get into each program, I will flash on the screen the program page from the budget book, and then that respective cabinet team member is going to walk you through all the variances. So really, you just need to listen. You'll hear all the variances, but if you want to tie back to the actual program detail, it'll be on the screen, so you don't have to flip back and forth from your book. At the end of every cabinet team member's program roster, I'll flip back to the presentation to present the next group of programs, and then start putting those books back up as well. So I'll be kind of emceeing all that, which gets a little challenging when I'm doing the variances for my own program. So we'll see how this goes. But first, overall budget navigation. This is the slide you saw last night. Won't go over the whole thing again, but this is our net budget allocation. This is what we're asking the town for, which is the 2.3% increase, $98.2 million. That doesn't include all of our grant funding. That's just the town's portion. They receive ECS on top of that to dilute what actually gets passed to the taxpayers. And as Nate said, this depends on the $900,000 OPEB prepayment to be made this year, which we're hoping to do with excess magnet cap grant dollars in May. So as you navigate the event tonight, there's a couple of things that are contained throughout the budget. And we don't go into each one of these in detail because they're general in nature. And one of those are contractual salary increases. So we have negotiated union contracts with all of our bargaining units, and they all have contractual increases. You saw that slide last night that showed the percentages for each one. So we don't call out every single line item of staff that simply has an increase due to contractual staff increases. There's also contractual increases, non-staff related. So for example, our HVAC contract. So that is a long-term 5-year contract, and it goes up a certain percent every year. We do note that sometimes throughout the presentation, but in general, that's a cost that rises year over year. Another one is programmatic reorganization, and that's essentially when we move staff or we move service costs from one program to another. So if there's a math teacher at one school and they go to another school, well, if you're looking at that school, it shows a variance. They really just moved over because of the need of the business. So what we're doing today is we're expanding on those major drivers that you saw last night, those 9 drivers, and we're going to get into the details of how the 24 budget differs from the 23 budget. That's going to be the comparison or the variance that we speak about throughout tonight's program. So just we did this for our district administrators as well, just kind of on a refresh of budgetary terms. I think I get accused of taking these for granted sometimes because we use these terms every day. But our accounts are rolled up in 3 ways. We have over 800 accounts in the district in the general budget, and they are by object, by program, and location. So in the budget book, if you ever wanted to see how data is broken out by object, it starts on page 11, program is by 24, and locations 122. We give a summary. So you could look at an object summary. The object summary is what we give to you every quarter when we do our quarterly reports. But you could also roll things up by program, which is the detail we expound on tonight, and by location if you want the numbers for a specific building. So I'll get into those a little bit more here. So an object is a major category used by several programs. So an object category is, you can see the 610001 general supplies. So if you go into the object summary and you want to see how much does the district as a whole spend on general supplies, that's where you'll see that data. And the way our budget book is laid out is you have actual expenses for fiscal year 21 and 22. That's that trend analysis I'm always talking about. Then you have the board's adopted budget for 23 and the amended budget for 23. The difference between those two could be line item transfers that happen throughout the year. But we're always comparing, for the sake of this program today, the amended budget to the superintendent's proposed budget. The year-to-date number we put in there, that's the more accurate numbers are what you see in our quarterly reports. We just give an idea of how much has been spent in that line when the last time the numbers were pulled. You see the superintendent's 24 budget, and the difference between those two is the variance. But tonight what we do is we actually get into the program detail. So each program rolls up, it usually has an administrator who's responsible for that program from a budgetary level, and then they roll up to a cabinet team member, which forms what we call the division. So what we do tonight is we go through the program detail reports. So you can see a little excerpt here for program 26, which is ESL. If you wanted to know, so we talked about that general supply aggregate object line number. So the whole district, how much do we spend on general supplies? We're budgeting 374,000. But if you wanted to know how much do they spend on general supplies in the ESL program, well, that's when you go into the program detail, and you can see that that line there is $3,000. And those are the variances we're going to talk about tonight, are down in that level of detail. When you think of a program is a collection of object accounts for a specific department, unit, or function, just like a business unit. So you could say program 13 is music. We have a district administrator that runs the music program. He's the primary day-to-day budget, but has budgetary responsibility for it. He's the one who actually builds his budget. Then that budget goes to his cabinet team member, which in this case is Elsie, and she reviews it and will present on it tonight. So if you want to see how much does a music program cost the district, you have all that data here for 21, 22, what our budget is in our current fiscal year, and what we're proposing it is next year, and the difference. Then if you want to talk about a location is just that. It's a physical space where a program takes place. So Norris School is a location. So if your question was, what's the electricity budget for Norris School? You go into the location detail. Again, we provide a location summary, which just has a list of all the locations and an overall cost. And if you go into the location detail, you can see the object accounts that are associated with that location. So in the example here, the electricity budget for Norris School is $34,000. So we take those 800 and some accounts, and they're organized in all different fashions in order to get you the data that you're looking for. But for tonight, we're going through program by program and looking at the object changes by program. So this is the format. Tomorrow we'll post and send out this presentation as a whole. And what we did was we basically put the variance report, which is, last night I mentioned that we give a full variance report right in the first budget book now. So if you wanted to flip to just what's changed in our budget versus last year, that's provided for you. In this presentation tonight, each cabinet team member is going to talk about each one of those variances, and then I'll put those into this presentation and then send that out tomorrow. So what you'll have tonight is we'll show a bar graph that shows the division as a whole. So you'll see one for operations and finance. And then as we're displaying the budget pages, the cabinet team member will be going through the variances. Well, those variances, I'll plug them into the presentation and send it out to you tomorrow, post it on the website. So it's all public and transparent, that everything is right there by program. So what that's going to look like is let's first talk about what we pull out for our variance report. It's exactly the same thing as we do for our year-end financial report, where we look at things that are an increase or a decrease over the 23 budget of greater than $10,000 or 10%, unless the 10% is under $1,000. And that just avoids where if you have an account, some of these are very granular, you have an account for $750. Well, if you take $80 out of it, you exceeded 10%. We're not going to waste our time talking about $80 tonight. So that won't be on the list. Another thing that we don't include are salary accounts that could possibly meet that 10%, 10,000 criteria. But if the change was due to general wage increases, transfers, or attrition, we don't talk about it. If it's anything else, if it's a new position, a deleted position, of which there aren't any, then it'll go on here. But if it's just because a math teacher moved from one program to another, or somebody changed a grade level, or it was just a general wage increase, an attrition-related change is if you had a position that was at the top step. So say they were making $90,000 at the top step, and that person retired, and we hired somebody in at a lower step, say call it a brand new teacher, and they started at say $75,000. That's an attrition-related savings. So we realize savings like that over the course of the year. So again, we're not going to talk about those. Those are just general course of business things. What we are going to talk about is you'll see for every program, you'll see the object line that met that criteria. It'll show you the current year's amended budget, the proposed budget for 24, and the difference, which is what we call the variance. So you'll find out what's changed. That's the description. The value of the change. That's the variance. The scale of the change is the change divided by last year's budget, right? So in this instance, it was 100% because we had a line item for 2,500. We're budgeting 0 for next year, so 100% savings. And then the Y is the variance explanation. So that'll be in text, and then we'll also talk, each cabinet team member will talk about that. And then after everybody's presentation, that's feel free to ask any questions you have, and we'll get into as much detail as you'd like. So that's how that lays out. When you go into the book itself, and this is what we'll put up on the page for each one, but if you were just doing some reading and you want to know what are in the different programs, that's where your program summaries come in. And you'll see the arrow on the left there says this is the elementary program, and that's program code 1. And then there's a description of what the program is. So as variances are explained by program, like I said, the details of the book will be on the screen for reference. So what that looks like, what will be on the screen as we talk through our variances, is the program detail report for that program. So 01 is the elementary program. This shows all of those object lines. Now this is everything. This isn't just what changed. This is the full data set. And then in this instance, Elsie would talk through any of the items that met those variance criteria we talked about. So the top section are all your objects for that program. The bottom section are all the staffing levels in that program. Just a little bit of jargon, FTE is full-time equivalent. So I am 1 FTE. There's some fancy little arrows there too to show you where 23 compares to 24, and then the FTE counts for 23 and 24. So anything on structure before I jump into my division? Same format as last year, by the way. I should have mentioned that first. So I'll get started. These are in rank order by the amount of dollar value to the budget. It's not that I'm that special. It's just that my division is it has the most dollar spend in the district. So what the operations and finance division is essentially anything in the district that doesn't have to do with educating students, IT, or HR. Everything else rolls up under operations and finance. So this is our finance department, the facilities department, school food service. Those are the big three. And then we have a bunch of sub departments that are underneath there. We call them units. We have purchasing, we have student transportation, facilities operations, maintenance, debt service rolls up in there. It's an exciting one. We have our capital improvement plan, safety, security. And we talked about last night, our big budget drivers in operations and finance are transportation, fuel, and utilities. Our health insurance reduction of 700, but our OPEB going up 700,000, and that prepay that we're doing to mitigate. So all in all, my team, we oversee about 33.8% of the proposed budget, or about $33 million. So our first program for tonight, which I'll push on the screen now, is finance, and that is program 55. Finance, we had a couple of variances this year, or going into next year, and they're all budget reductions. So the first two are certified extra duty and non-certified OT and extra duty. Those were both reduced by 34%. And the reason that was done, that's what we call our contract contingency. So when we're going into a budget year where we don't know what our labor contracts are going to be for next year, that money is there to backfill those increases. This year, we put plugs in to estimate what those increases were going to be so we could lower our contract contingency. That's why that was done this year. Advertising went from 2,500 to 0. That's the one I used in my example. The reason why we did that is thankfully we no longer have to publish bids and RFPs in the Hartford Current. I, in 10 years, have never had a vendor come to me and said, I saw your bid and RFP in the Hartford Current. Everything is posted online now and on the Department of Administrative Services website, as well as our websites. So in this legislative session, we don't have to do that anymore, which is great. We saved $2,500. Miscellaneous revenue is just a reclass. The town pays us a little over $100,000 each year for use of our pools. We used to put that under miscellaneous revenue. Under finance, we're now putting it where it always should have been, which is under community use revenue. So it's just going from one place to another. And there'll be a little pause after each program because I'll pull up, they don't go right in order since we're doing them by division, where I plug into the PDF there and pull up the next one. So our next program is program 58, which is benefits and fixed charges. This one we spent a lot of time on last night, where we were talking about the different things where it wasn't really a driver, but there's a lot of big numbers here. So for example, Social Security and Medicare, that goes up whenever you have wages go up, that scales with that. We have our OPEB and pension. Again, we talked about that a lot last night. We're going from that normal contribution is $650,000. We've been prepaying it. So in this current year, we only had 200 that we had to pay into the town's trust. So we thought we were going to be going from 2 to 650 this year. Instead, the town's actuaries have said we've got to contribute 1.35 million. And we're going to make a $900,000 prepayment to mitigate that. So what's left is 450. So we're going from 2 to 450 into our OPEB. Payer retirement contribution, again, that's not an item we don't control. The actuaries run those numbers and they tell us what we have to put into it. So that's going up. Our defined contribution, that's a kind of a misnomer. It's not a defined contribution pension. The town used to have a pension plan for employees, like, for example, myself, who's not in a bargain unit. I'm not in the state teachers pension program. That was done away with back in 2006. So what we have now is akin to like a 401k in the private industry. So as more people enter that program, when you get retirees from the old pension program and people enter under this new program, the cost of that goes up, but it's really easy to manage. It's 4% of the salary, and we have no ongoing liability towards it. Workers' comp, that's a number that the town manages for us as well. It's another town managed trust. So it represents the increase there. Health insurance, that was a big savings for us this year based on a reduction of claims. Again, that's an actuarial number, and we're estimating that we have to pay in $500,000 less into the town managed trust, which takes away some of that sting from OPEB. And finally, we have our property and liability insurance. Again, that's a program that the town manages for us. There are items, I believe they're in the charter, that show what contribution level has to be made based on past claims. So that's where we are. So that is benefits and fixed charges. Next on to some more fun stuff, which is facilities. So facilities is made up of 3 components. There's 4 components really: plant operations, plant maintenance, safety and security, and CapEx, capital expenditures. First up is plant operations. So this is everything not maintenance related, but these are day-to-day operations of the building, all our custodial services, water, things of that nature. Only a couple of changes in this program. One is in repair and maintenance services. $5,000, not much, but it is 17%, which is to pool and custodial equipment repair. The labor costs that are from our pool contractor. We have 2 Olympic-size indoor pools. They require a lot of maintenance. That price has gone up over the years. Our RFP is ending this year, and we know we're going to face a little bit higher pricing next year. The other one is maintenance supplies. So this is a bad and good story rolled into one. We buy a lot of maintenance supply, or this is custodial supplies in this instant. Big line item for us, over $200,000 a year. We signed a new contract a year before COVID hit and all this inflation stuff started getting out of control. Obviously, this new emphasis on building cleaning just sent the market through the roof. Custodial supplies were up before all this new inflation madness in the construction industry started. So we had just signed a fixed price contract. Timing could not have been better. Our supplier has held to it. They have honored their pricing. They're actually losing money on our account for every dollar. I give them a lot of credit. They have hung in there with us. But we know when that's coming up, we'll go out to RFP again at the end of this fiscal year. That's gonna go up, and it's gonna go up big. We've talked to several providers, and they said just in the past 2 years, they've been up 30 to 40%. We're budgeting about 28% and hoping that the market, since we're such a big buyer, we can leverage that. Another thing is equipment replacement. We have life cycle for all our custodial equipment. We have a massive fleet of custodial equipment, everything from vacuums to auto scrubbers, things like that. We have a replacement cycle. We're coming in now where we're starting to get to where we started. So when we started this program, it was done about 10 years ago. A ton of equipment was bought to jumpstart this, and then we sustained it. But now that 10th year is coming up where we've got to make a bigger purchase. Again, it's not a huge dollar value. We try to do this very incrementally. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment. We try to replace 20 to 30,000 a year. So we're moving to 40 this year to get over that hump. Next one is plant maintenance. This is exactly what it sounds like. These are all our maintenance, repair services by PM services by outside contractors, to our own personnel that repair our buildings on a day-to-day basis. So program 61, couple changes here. Really, this one's really tiny. Equipment, it's 10%. It's 10%. It's over $1,000, so we put it in there. But our storage unit rate increased for next year 10%. So that's why we're talking about that. Natural gas and electricity, we talked about those in depth last night. Natural gas, that's a supply rate increase that we're experiencing right now. Our consumption has been pretty stable, which is good. Electricity is kind of a double whammy. We're going to be cooling 300 classrooms this year, and our supply contract is significantly below market and is going out to bid. We go in with the town for that bid, and that changes in December of 2023. So that's our increase in electricity. Gasoline, again, we talked about that last night in the realm of student transportation, but we also run gasoline for our own fleet, for our plow vehicles. So we're forecasting an increase in that as well of 27%. And buildings is a very general line, but it's a huge line. This is all our contracted repair and maintenance work. So this is just, we're showing the effects of inflation here. We probably should have taken this number up a little bit more. We're hoping things start to stabilize a little bit. So we pulled that up about 7%, but that's a big account for us. Next is program 62. This is a small program. It's an important one, but a small one budgetary wise, which is safety and preparedness, which are campus safety officers. This is repairs and maintenance to our security infrastructure, upgrades to our security infrastructure, led by our safety and preparedness manager. So a couple of variances here. Two of these are actually negatives. One is our non-certified substitutes. That's one of those, you heard me say trend analysis a lot. We look at years of actuals, and if it looks like we could take down the budget number, we'll do that. We do it very conservatively. We don't want spikes. We could have, it could go up for next year, but this year we had enough trend data to warrant actually coming down in our campus safety officer substitutes. We also have software licenses. Our newer camera systems all run off of licensed systems. Last year, we had a bunch of new camera systems put in through grants. We had to pay the licensing fees for those, but now those aren't paid every year. So this schedule reflects what's due next year. So that's going from 10,000 to 4,000. And then equipment new is that line was actually, we always budget about $30,000 to $40,000 for new security equipment. This 23 line was artificially low because we moved money out of that during the year to pay for those licenses, and then we cover the new equipment through grants. So again, we do a lot of interaction between grants and general budget on all sides of the business, but especially in operations. Next one is 63. That's student transportation. That's just what it sounds. This is our busing fleet for our regular ed transportation. All of our SPED busing and our school-related busing for field trips and things like that are in different programs. This is our general fleet of buses to do our regular education students. So the two increases here are in our transportation cost contract with DACO. You'll see this a couple times throughout tonight's presentation, our contractual increase with DACO. 24 is our last year of their contract before we go out to RFP again. We had a 5% increase for 24 by contract. However, we were able to mitigate that increase this year by going through all of our lines of services that we do with DACO and removing stuff that's no longer used. Like if we haven't run a certain route in 3 years, we got rid of it. And we also reallocated cost to go. If it was a SPED cost, it goes into SPED now. If it's transporting a kid out of district, it goes into that appropriate account now. So we're right sizing all of these accounts. So really this line only went up 1%, but it's a big number. So it made its way onto the list here. Second is gasoline. We talked about that in depth last night. This is the gas, diesel, and propane that we use to power our fleet. Our price went up 77% year over year, and it has subsided a little bit. We're forecasting an average rate about $4.50 a gallon for next year. So we hope that maintains. We've been seeing gasoline come down, but diesel staying up there, which is a shame. Next one is switching gears a little bit. That's into capital improvement. So this is what we call, you always hear me say this during board meetings when we talk about funding bids, where it's in Program 80. So what Program 80 is what I refer to as our baked in capital. Sounds like an oxymoron, but this is the capital component of our operating budget. In most business structures, your capital budget's completely separate. In ours, since we go in as a line item in the town's budget, our capital improvement gets wound into that. So what we try to do in this program is just keep a steady increase year over year. We package projects together, and that we call it our guaranteed capital, because as soon as the town approves the budget, we start planning on spending this money versus capital reserve money, which we never know if we're going to get funded till halfway through the summer, or we've already lost the summer construction season. So this year, like I said, we package projects, we take them right out of the capital plan. We have a schedule, and we put them into this line that you see here called construction services, which is just, we're doing additional projects. We kind of round off, and we went up 55,000 in that account, which is only 9%. And then we have building improvements. That's kind of a misnomer, but some things don't fit in any line, so that's where they go. This is our asbestos program. This year or in 24, we're due for our required 3-year inspection. So the cost for that was added back into this line, and that's the increase you see. We don't just carry this. This is something we do in our budget overall. If we don't need it for the next year, we take it out of the budget. But then when we need it for that year, it'll go back in. Some people just keep this stuff in all the time. And to me, that's not transparent. That's not the right thing to do. It throws off all your trends. So this line was taken out for last year, and we put it back in for this year because we come due. The next one is debt service. Debt service is very straightforward. This is our, it's the right page here. This is our Johnson Controls contract that we're still paying for from eons ago, it seems. The end is near. Fiscal year 26 is our last payment. So in fiscal year 24, our payment's $658,000. I cannot wait to get rid of this payment, because we could start using that money to actually invest in our facilities through our Program 80. So that'll be a great year for us come FY 27. So that is it for operations and finance. And any questions for my programs?
Ben, can you just explain the difference between, you were saying capital reserves and capital, it was, well,
Yep. So Program 80, that's a good question. Program 80 is our capital program. So that is money that we build into our budget every year, and we allocate it towards specific projects for our capital plan. So as soon as the town approves our budget, right in April, before the money actually becomes legally accessible to us, we start planning to spend that money, usually in the upcoming summer. So that is projects from the capital plan put into our budget and funded. Our capital reserve is not part of the general budget process. What that is, at the end of the fiscal year, if we have any money left over in our general budget, we're able to divert that money. Instead of giving it back, we could put that into a capital reserve account. Then we pull projects out of our capital plan, and we use that money for them. So that's the difference between those two. Program 80 is capital that's in our budget. Capital reserve is project money that comes after our budget's over, and if we have any extra funds.
thank you.
So next on the docket is.
Oh, I have a quick question for you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. How are we segregating duties over like disbursements within the schools?
In terms of capital?
Yeah,
Disbursements of.
Well, like how each school gets
Just how their budget's built in general?
Right.
Oh, yeah. So every school, the building leader, so like for LC schools, secondary and elementary are a little bit different, because the secondary schools, their programs they're mostly built up by programs, and then they have what's called a principal administration account. If you go to that location summary, it'll actually show you every school and their number. Their budget is built by their principal. So it's not a number that from the corporate level we push to them. They actually bring up to us. So if a principal says, I need $1,000 extra because I've got chairs in my kindergarten classroom that need to be replaced, they'll budget for that. and that goes in. So this year, I believe just about every reasonable request from the principal level is incorporated in this budget.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Sharon,
Okay,
you are on.
Oh,
I am
I have
on.
a question.
Okay, Pupil Personnel Services Division. There are 9 program accounts associated with the PPS division, the largest being the Special Education Department. And this is all staffing, resources, programming for our students who are identified as requiring special services, and they're in pre-K through 12th grade. Next up is our Woodland School. As you know, it is a pre-K 12 program, therapeutic program for students who are identified as having significant needs or an emotional disturbance. And as you know, it is also a tuition-based program for out-of-district students. Then we have our related support services. These are the folks that support the delivery of specially designed instruction to students requiring special services. These are our psychologists, our social workers, our speech language pathologists, our OTs and our PTs, our nursing services. And then we have our residency department that's comprised of 2 folks who go out and do residency investigations. And they do this when we have a question about students, do they legitimately live in East Hartford, the city of East Hartford? There are 3 major budget drivers that account for the cost increase in FY proposed budget. That's our external placements. These are the private school placements that some of our students go to. These are private special education facilities. Then, of course, the special education cost, tuitions, not the tuitions, the sped costs to the magnet school, students who attend magnet schools. And then also a reduction in our expectation of revenue from the Woodland program. This budget increase represents about $2,600,000, and it is 33.8% of the proposed budget. So first up is our program 23. This is special education. And as a recap, students have to be determined eligible for special services. They are between the ages of 3 and their 22nd birthday. A PPT is convened. If the child's determined eligible, an individual education program is designed, and there is specially designed instruction that requires resources and supports to provide services to these children. So first up, certified extra duty. You'll see that there is a 30% adjustment, and that's to match trend analysis. For special education, transportation, this contractual increase was countered with lower service needs and reallocating to other accounts. Transportation for athletic school events. There we see a 52% increase. We have requested to do an equine therapy program specifically for our Woodland students. And then we have our travel. There's a 25% increase, and that's dedicated to my special education supervisors who not only travel to different buildings within the district, but they will go to private special education schools as well as to the magnet schools when necessary to either conduct PPTs, do observations, etc. Then we have our miscellaneous purchase services. This is a 100% increase. This is a new request, and this is for students at Woodland to attend equine therapy sessions. General supplies. This is 16% in variance. This accounts for our Woodland High School graduation, as well as the ceremony that we have for our kindergarten students. Instructional supplies. There's a large increase here. We are hoping to create 2 new classrooms, one being at the ECLC, that would be an integrated classroom, and another self-contained program at East Hartford Middle School. And this is due to the increased numbers of students that we have coming into the district and the increased need that we have within our special ed population. Then we have our certified salaries. The revenue allocation adjustment is tied to the tuition ratio at Woodland, and this is expected to fluctuate each year. And then our behavior managers, this is a reduction of 4%. Forecasted billing of one-to-one behavior managers at Woodland. We have a more accurate way now of understanding how to bill for these one-to-one supports. Okay, here we go. Program 24, external placements. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that some students require services outside of East Hartford Public Schools. These are students that go to private special education facilities. They either are there because a planning and placement team has recommended this, or the court has ordered it, or it is a DCF placement. So you will note transportation, there is a 3% contract increase and adjustment, and that's again based on a trend analysis. Transportation for summer school, our ESY program. Through the years, we've been able to fund that through our IDEA grant, but it's beginning to be increasingly more difficult to do this. And so we've had to increase the school budget request to accommodate for those services. Tuition LEAs in-state sped. Again, you're going to see an increase of 10.6% over the actuals in fiscal year 22. And this allows for the account to have a chance of ending within the budget instead of going over budget. So tuition, private special education, 2% increase, and this is due to the increase in anticipated increase in the cost of service. Special, excuse me, special ed tuitions, the Woodland revenue, this is negative 27% reduction. The Woodland revenue adjustment to reflect the market conditions, and we've talked a little bit about that. This is just being realistic for the time frame that we're in right now, and so this budget request reflects that. Okay, home instruction. So this is program 25. There are occasions when students are required to receive their instruction at home, and that's typically due to a very serious medical circumstance, and they receive their instruction at home. And this adjustment is based on the trend analysis. Okay, program 30, social work services. And this, we adjusted the instructional supplies to reflect what we really do draw from the social worker account for their resources and supplies. We traditionally take that from program 23, instructional supplies. Excuse me. Health services, program 31. This is our nursing department. And again, you will see that there's an adjustment here based on trend analysis. Program 32, psychological services. This is for our psychologists and our school social workers. There's no significant change to this program. Speech, language, hearing, program 33. Again, no significant change to this program. Program 34, our occupational and physical therapy. We did reallocate funds to more reflect where we should be drawing funds from. The largest requests that we receive from our OTs and PTs are for new equipment. This is for our wheelchairs, our prone standers, our side liers, mats, any large equipment, and that's where we draw the account from. And then last, our paraprofessionals, Program 40, there is no significant change to these accounts. Are there any questions?
Sharon, what is equine therapy?
Equine therapy. So in Hartford, there is an organization, I believe it's called Ebony Woman Horse Farm, and students can benefit from experiencing, they learn how to ride, they learn how to care for horses. So equine refers to horses.
Oh, okay. So that's very expensive, huh?
Well, I think expensive is probably relative, but it does cost money.
So
It-
is that one of the programs that we say use to pull some of the children into the school?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Equine therapy is very has been regarded highly for populations of students with significant needs. It's a way for students to learn how to care for another living creature, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a horse. It could be a rabbit. We also have therapy dogs now going over to Woodland. So animals are a wonderful way to bring out the best in all of us, actually. But this is something our principal requested and believes in, and so I value it as well, and we'll go from there.
I think I was waiting to get to this story. So you talked at the top of the call about what can we do at Woodland School to market ourselves. And, I would say we are in the experimental phase of that right now. This was one of the major bets. This is one of the bets we made at Woodland. Again, our Woodland principal has had a significant degree of autonomy and authority to come in and try to add some program variations. This was a request she made. I think it's a great idea. This is something we can market. This is something that sets us apart. This is something that makes us different, and we hope makes us appealing. Last week I was at Woodland School walking around, and the students were buzzing. We partnered with a nonprofit therapy dog agency and actually brought a therapy dog in. It was incredibly, it was a big deal for the kids. That was actually a free service in the partnership we have. But we are really trying to experiment with some nuanced things that'll make this school a different school. So I'm glad you asked that question, because that was the answer to your question you asked about at the top of the call.
Yeah, and how long have we had that program?
The equine therapy we don't have. That's in this budget. That would be no. The dog program, the first day of the dog was last week. So, and that's a very, very small thing. We're just trying to see how things go.
I'm a little confused, but I'll leave it alone for now.
No, don't leave it alone. Happy to keep, let's make it so you're not confused.
Because it's in the budget, equestrian therapy. So I thought that is one of the programs already implemented that we use that draw the kids into East Hartford Woodland School, that generate revenue. But you're saying that we don't have it yet, but we're going
Right, we're hoping to have it.
That's why this is a budget proposal that we're putting in front of you. So obviously a budget you build for the year ahead. So this is the fiscal year 24 budget. So we are in fiscal year 23. So this program is not there. Most of these dollars are spent on transportation for the students to get the students back and forth to this opportunity. We don't have horses at Woodland School. We don't have stables there. So no, this is a proposal for us moving forward. But as soon as we feel like it's there, obviously, as soon as we get this budget approved, we're going to start marketing it as a program we have at the school.
Okay, so
Maybe
they
you can put the horses
be
in the transportation budget.
to do that, right?
Students have to be transported to the horses. Horses don't come to us.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I volunteered, Doris, you may not know this about me, but I have goats at home. And I volunteered to bring my goats at no charge, but so far Sharon hasn't taken, Sharon has not, Sharon has to
they
take
I
me
do
up on
like
that.
goats
they
though.
eat up everything, so they good. They good. All right, thank you guys.
Sharon, I've heard some wonderful things about the Ebony Horsewomen. They're out of Hartford, right? Vine
Yes,
Street. So I
absolutely.
think they work out of Keeney Park. If I think they work out of Keeney Park, I think they have their stables and everything there. But I heard some wonderful things. I think that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I do have a question about. I guess it was referring to home instruction. I think I might be confused. The concern, I have a concern for expulsions, and I'm not sure if expulsions would be the same thing as home instruction. I
No,
think that's
no,
okay.
there is no connection.
Okay,
Actually,
okay,
several years back, it was legislated that you could no longer provide tutoring or home programs for students who are expelled. They are entitled to what they call an educational opportunity, and it must be a full program with access to the curriculum. And if it's a special needs child who has been expelled, they must have their IEP delivered. So home instruction, that program is not connected to expelled students.
okay. So maybe you can answer a question for me, and it is a concern with regards to the amount of expulsions that we're seeing. And I guess not necessarily the amount of expulsions, but the invites and us not having enough board members to sit in on some of these cases, which I really think it's important that board members are in. So it just seems like we really haven't been able to, schedule time where board members can actually sit in these meetings. So I guess the concern is there anything else that we can do? I think it's important that board members are a part of some of these meetings, as opposed to, because if we can't make it, then you turn it over to, yeah,
A hearing officer.
I think you're hearing.
Yes, absolutely. As you know, we are on a time frame that we try to complete the expulsion process. It's very prescribed, and by day 10 of a student's out of school suspension, we like to hold the hearing. If we're not able to hold the hearing on day 10, then we have to allow the student to go back to their home school. And that can be very disruptive to the student and the students in the building. And so when you see that email come out from Damaris requesting board member attendance, we have to respond to that in a really timely manner. And so therefore, we will go, we have a hearing officer already, ready and primed to go. But in response to your initial question about the numbers, we are seeing an increase this year, but I think we are still dealing with some of the results of the pandemic and students responding to the structure of a school environment. And that may take a little bit of time.
I think, Vanessa, I wrote to the board about this a couple weeks ago. I wrote a significant update to the board on expulsion hearings, and several of you did contact and talk to me about that. I think so in two parts. One, we are seeing an uptick in mandatory expulsions. These are expulsions that are mandatory by the state of Connecticut that are either possession of drugs with the intent to sell, that's dealing drugs, or possession of a gun in school or weapons in school. Those aren't conversational expulsions. Those aren't expulsions that are a decision. That's a mandatory state law. And certainly we've seen an incredible increase, unfortunately, in the numbers of students with drugs in school. And we do believe this is tied to some of the recent legislation around the marijuana statutes, et cetera. We're seeing our kids with access to gummies, edibles, and other things like that in our school that we haven't seen previously in the past. And we're monitoring that. We're working with that. We're trying to work with youth services regarding education programs around that. That's a real concern for us. I think the second piece, though, is that whether a board member participates or doesn't participate in the expulsion hearings, and I wrote this very frankly and candidly to the board, we believe from an administrative point of view that the use of a hearing officer is the best way for us to proceed with these expulsions. Many of you have participated in expulsion hearings. It's a very odd place for a board member to be in, because it's really the only place where a board member actually interacts with children from your position as elected officials. These are extremely emotionally charged. These are very sad. These are very tragic. And these are very serious cases when you get to that level. And we've had experiences of these in the past with board members who aren't experienced into those type of settings, which for the most part, our board is not experienced in these settings. Decisions are made sometimes from a board level that create legal liability for a school district. So most school districts in Connecticut use a hearing officer, as we are doing now when we don't get a response from our board. We think that's good practice. We are not necessarily asking you as a board to respond. I mean, obviously we reach out and ask you to sign up for these emails you can, but I can't tell you that this is something that we wish you did more of. We don't want to be in expulsion hearings, but when we're in expulsion hearings, we want these meetings handled with real sensitivity and care to the legal ramifications that follow it. So I'm not meaning this in any way of a disparaging way. This is a very serious part of the job. We've had 8 expulsions this year. We had 8 last year for the entire year. But if you work back to the 17-18 school year, we had 24 expulsions. And if you work back to that to 3 years before, we were 50 plus. So this is still a small number for us comparatively over a 10-year trend. As a board, we worked hard to reduce that number because we only expel students for mandatory expulsions or assault on one of our staff members. But that's the hard facts of where we are. And the level of violence, weapons, and drugs are something that across Connecticut urban schools, my superintendent colleagues are very concerned about these issues as well. So a lot, you didn't ask for all that, but it's a good opportunity for me to update you on it.
So, I mean, is that the way, the board, do you think the board should go that way? I mean, if it's, if that's the way, it should be, then why give us the invitation to join in these hearings? Because my thing is, it's like, oh my God, I just feel so bad because I can't make it. I'm here and the other. So do we want to make a decision? Yes. This is probably something for a different meeting, but is it something that we need to discuss further? You know what I'm saying?
I don't think you're wrong.
Just let us know that something's going on, but then why give us an invitation and ask, see if we can make it, and then you turn around and say, well, we really don't want you there. So it's like, what is it? What is it?
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I understand 100% what you're saying. First of all, and it's funny because I've had the same conversation with another board member who said the same thing, like, I feel guilty, I can't come, I'm working during the day, I can't get there. And that's when our families are available, that's when services are available, that's when the police oftentimes in these meetings are available, and we're on this tight timeline. I think, Vanessa, we've left this the way it is because we haven't wanted to make this a public discussion for the board where people would come in and say, well, our board members can't even go to expulsion hearings and now they have to pay an attorney. This is well worth the money to pay an attorney. You've looked at attorney fees in this budget throughout the thing. This is a very, very, very tiny, minuscule part of it, and a part where having an attorney really protects the board and protects the school district. So it's not that we don't want you there. I frankly don't want to be there myself. It's that we want these things handled very carefully because we want to protect the board from potentially a bad decision. You've sat in these meetings, Vanessa, before where a board member in a well-meaning intention begins to counsel the student or begins to counsel the family. That's inappropriate. That opens us up for significant legal litigation down the road, or speaks out of turn. And it's never come from a bad place. It's always been a good place.
Oh yeah.
And I know you've been there and watched that because I've sat there with you. But yes, I hate that phrase. I don't want you there because I want you.
No. It's just that it's like, so I think it should be, we kind of should make up our mind at some point.
Yeah.
How you know what I'm saying?
I agree. So maybe we have to find a way to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bremner.
I was going to say something, but I mean, I've experienced many expulsions, and it was very, very interesting. There was crying, there was laughing, there was a lot of things that go on in expulsions, and I was just wondering why no board members seem to be able to make it to these expulsions. But I understand what you're saying, because it changed a lot when we just started doing just the paper part. Everything was on paper and it was a yes or no.
Yep.
And I know Sharon enjoys getting out early without having to sit back and wait to have an expulsion at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So,
Doris, this is a good point. We didn't bring about as many of our expulsion hearings happen. The state authorized a new process called stipulated agreement, where essentially the principal and the parent agreed to a terms of an expulsion because they're mandatory. It's going to happen. Of course, the board still has to approve it, but it really does become completely a superfluous meeting because this is a mandatory thing by state statute.
right.
And the parents, the principal, and the child have already agreed to this thing. So there's a real silliness, frankly, of why are we dragging people out of work? Why are we dragging people into these situations when, to a degree, this has been mapped and built out and built in agreement, which stipulated agreements are always the preferable way to go because you've engaged the parent.
I agree.
Sometimes you can't get there. Sometimes you have to be evidentiary because you have a parent who won't agree. We had a student a few weeks ago who was, you've read the notes on this, involved in a very, very serious drug case in another state. Parents wanted the, mistakenly wanted the evidentiary process, which did not play well for them. But that's an example of how this thing plays forward. So yeah, this is a serious part of our business. This is the part none of us like, but Doris, you've done your share of them, and
Yeah.
somewhere Mr. Damashi is
Yeah.
growling about what I'm
king of
saying
it.
right now.
Yes, yes, the king of the expulsions.
King of expulsion.
Put him in Woodland School.
He wanted worse than that.
Yeah, yeah. The mess.
Rest in peace.
So Sharon, I don't know if you guys can hear me or not, but okay, awesome. Does the equine therapy require any extra insurance on our end? Do we have to like do anything with that?
I'll leave that to Ben. I don't believe so. I believe the insurance is on the business owner, but Ben?
Yeah, I would treat that like any other field trip.
Right.
You could go to Mystic Seaport and fall off Charles Morgan as well. It's a good question. It's something we'll bring up with our carrier, our student insurance carrier. But it's actually these types of programs are fairly common nowadays. So I don't see it being any cost add.
Okay.
If no more questions,
Okay.
we'll go to Elsie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I apologize. I got bumped out. I panicked. Good evening, everyone. So I am going to be talking about the elementary education programs. Underneath the elementary education programs, there are 10, which account for 13.4% of the proposed budget. In terms of the department overview, this consists of our district elementary schools, which is of course our 8 elementary schools, and our early childhood learning center over at Hockenham. So our pre-K program that serves our 3 and 4-year-olds. In addition, the K-12 World Language EL Bilingual Department does live in the elementary education, albeit Anne Marie and I, we both work directly with the supervisors and with those departments as an elementary and a secondary team, as well as K-12 art and music programs and kindergarten through grade 12 health and PE programs. Major budget drivers here, and this is something that's been a point of discussion, certainly has been the transition of the 15 certified full-time employees into the Alliance grant projection, which basically includes all of our kindergarten through grade 4 certified teachers within the Alliance district. Another major budget driver is the 3 new positions to support our growing population of English language learners. The 2 certified teachers to be split between 2 Goodwin and Pitkin, as well as Langford and O'Brien. And then the additional support of an EL coordinator to help and assist with the translation services and the testing in terms of the last links upon entry and the coordination of the testing during the testing window.
Excuse me, just to
program
let
is
y'all know, my lights just flickered, so I can't guarantee anything right now, okay? So I'm here now.
Vanessa just texted me that her power went out right now, so
Oh.
let's hope everything's all right.
Okay.
Just to
Oh,
let
no.
everybody know, I don't know if everybody was on the call earlier. If we go down, like those of us in the board office here, stay on. We're going to switch over to wireless and we'll rejoin the call. So don't abandon us if you see a couple of us drop off. Back to Elsie.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So here we have elementary program 1, kindergarten through grade 5, and this is essentially what we've been talking about in terms of all of the kindergarten through grade 4 certified teachers in those grade levels being moved to the Alliance grant. Early childhood education, this is our pre-K program number 6. And this is an unused account. The staff costs are distributed between grants and other budget lines. So that's what's reflected here. Next program, which is program number 9, is our physical education health K through 12. What we see here in this particular one is an increase in staff development, which consists of training for program rates and accounts for CPR, first aid, and lifeguard. Another thing that's also an element of this is that the state is requiring a lifeguard to deliver aquatic curriculum at the secondary level, and that was formerly covered under salaries, but we are now partnering with the town and paying that as a service as well. In addition, we see here the instructional supplies that increase, and that is reflective of the increases to ensure that there's equitable spending between all of the elementary schools. And the increase that we see here for the athletic equipment is the cost increase on continuing to replace PE and athletic fitness equipment across our schools. Next up is World Languages, program 11, and there are no significant changes to this program. As for art, program number 12, we see here a decrease in new equipment, and the reason for that is because Synergy received new equipment in fiscal year 23, so no new equipment will be required in the fiscal year 24. Music, our program number 13. What we see here is the certified extra duty. So that's what Ben described earlier, and adjusting that based on the trend analysis that we've seen.
Yes.
In addition, our non-certified OT and extra, same thing. We see a 50% change here. And again, that is an adjustment based on the trend analysis. We also see a 10% increase in instrument repair costs. So the repairs and maintenance services for our instruments. And the decrease of 19% reflected here is the discontinuation of temporary online resources. So the decrease there in the software technology. Our EL K through 12 program number 26. This is where we see the addition of the 2 English language learners, teachers that will be split right now between the 4 elementary schools, combined with regular contractual increases and allocations to support the rising population of our second language learners. Additionally, here is reflected the addition of a non-certified staff person, which is the EL coordinator position. And this position helps to support, again, translation services within 504 meetings, PPT meetings, certainly parent-teacher conferences, as well as the coordination of lost links testing and working alongside central registration and Liz to coordinate all of that work. And finally, program number 41, which is curriculum development. So the certified extra, that's the adjustment based on the trend analysis again. And when we see the general supplies as well as the instructional supplies, the decreases that we see there represent that accounts are being phased out. So costs are actually directly being booked to individual locations, so individual settings. So that accounts for the general supplies and the instructional supplies and the decreases that we see there. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I have a question, Elsie. Last night at the meeting, Nate was, I think, answering maybe Don's question about programming and funding and whatnot. And when he got to the ELA part of the answer, he suggested that at one point it was talked about having an ELA teacher at the ECLC, but then it was ultimately decided to put 2 out of the 3 new hires in the elementary schools that were Goodwin, Pitkin, Langford, and O'Brien. Seeing that this is a trend, and you guys keep talking about trend analysis, a trend that we're increasing these numbers of ELA students and needs, I'm just curious as to why we didn't choose to do the ECLC and why we went straight to elementary schools.
This is a hard question for Elsie because that's what she fought for. So I'm really interested to see how she answers this. Go ahead, Elsie. It's going to be fun.
Sorry, Elsie.
Val, I'm really glad that you brought that up because I proposed these positions and part of the proposal was adding supports at the ECLC for our 3 and 4-year-olds because I really and truly believe that early intervention and getting students the linguistic needs that they need so that when they do come into kindergarten, we are seeing, you know, a decrease, if you will, in students after taking the last links, you know, being a bilingual education student or having an EL label, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that one of the things that we're experiencing here in East Hartford is and really grappling mightily with where we put these supports. At the preschool level, there really is, you know, we don't want to identify students too early as second language learners because there's certainly implications in terms of that, because if we're identifying students that are 4 years old, the likelihood that they are probably going to have a more difficult time testing out of it is an indicator, something that we don't want to get into that. But I do believe that looking into getting supports for our 3 and 4-year-olds at Hockenham School, given that the numbers are rising there as well, we have 360 students at Hockenham School as of yesterday. And we are requiring lots of services there for those kiddos as well. So I know I'm not answering your question, and I'm not answering it because I wanted it, and I'm going to continue to advocate for that. But we ultimately decided at the elementary specifically for those settings because those 4 elementary schools have the highest concentration of our second language learners. As an example, Langford Elementary School right now, their kindergarten cohort consists of 50% of all of their students as second language learners. That's the highest that we've seen. We're seeing the same trend at O'Brien Elementary School as well in the lower grades. And we are also seeing a significant increase at Mayberry and Norris School. So we're trying to work on service delivery in addition to adding staff. We are also seeing some increases in our populations in our other 4 elementary schools. So we are also trying to address what service delivery looks like there by adding additional staffing, because in addition to the staffing, the service delivery model is really an integral part of helping our students, not only to acquire English, but to be readers and writers.
If I can just add to that too, this is one of the great parts about having an awesome teammate like Elsie, because you can fight fiercely behind closed doors and then we leave. It's a unified front regarding a decision that we made that we made together. And I think, you know, Val, this is one of those decisions that was an or decision when we wish it was an and decision. And part of the rationale of why this ends up at the elementary schools is in response to our data. So our data we're looking at really closely is the Smarter Balance scores for EL students. our students don't start taking smarter balance, obviously, until third grade. So we're trying to start with that as a prioritized objective. EL scores, loss link scores essentially start counting for us with our students after the third time taking the test or third year of being in country. So when you start thinking about a student at the 3 or 4 year old age, they're a very new, just based on the numerical age, in country student. So it doesn't make a ton of sense for us to invest this at the ECLC right now, knowing we have this gap in the elementary level, and then having it obviously parlay to our initiative and agenda at the secondary level. So it's one of those things that frankly, probably you'll see us come back to in our final budget deliberations around positions that we were going to add. The positions that shook down to were EL positions and special ed positions. And we landed with EL if you're to offset what we did last year. Last year we landed on SPED. So Sharon also had proposals in here that didn't make it through the process to get where it is. And that's as we try to create a budget number that's a reasonable number, addresses our needs, and gives us position moving forward. So that's the answer of how that decision was made. But as I most often say regarding financial decisions, when we talk about the needs here, they're significant, and sometimes you're making hard choices, which this is one of those.
How many of the students at Langford, you said that there's a particular needy kindergarten class there. How many of those kindergartners came from the ECLC?
That's a great question, Val. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. We are, for the first time, specifically tracking the percentage of students from Hockenham School that are going directly into our elementary schools. As you know, we have what we call student achievement meetings, where we meet in the fall, the winter, and the spring. And we have added that data very specifically, and we've added the baseline data of every single kindergartner from Hockenham School that is in one of our kindergarten classrooms, because that's a really good data point for us as we continue to work with Renee and her team in terms of refining the creative curriculum, as well as looking at what components of illustrative math, meaning what components of problem-based learning specifically in mathematics for 4-year-olds specifically is going to help to be able to transition them to kindergarten. As we know, the illustrative math program is highly, highly academic in vocabulary, and there's rich opportunities there to embed really great SIOP strategies for students that are just best practices for second language learners, but really for all students. So we're hoping that we learn a lot about this. And it's interesting that you asked that, because it's something that we've been examining pretty much all summer long. It's a little bit tricky in the beginning to decipher actually how many students total percentage, because I work with central registration to look at where those students are going. However, we know that we have transients, and we know that some of those kiddos that were supposed to come to our elementary schools have left the district. But definitely more to come on that, because we're examining that very much.
Okay, and just one more question, I promise.
Sure.
So when we start with these 2 new ELA teachers at the 4 elementary schools, are we also offering support for their parents? I mean, is it false to assume that their parents also maybe aren't English speakers as their primary language? And if so, what supports are we offering them as well?
Yeah, so we have, that's, again, Val, thank you. That's another really, really good question. And conversely, if families are non-English speakers, that's not to imply that the child is a non-English speaker. We've had families come in that are not fluent, but their children are fluent, and they're not within the bilingual education program. They're general education students. But for those families, it's really significantly important that we support them. And I know that we do a ton of work with our building-based family support specialists. They do very, very specific activities tailored to meet the needs of our families, to leverage their voice, to engage them in the learning, like real engagement, not just a one and done sort of like school event, but like real engagement. But again, so they're Spanish speaking only. So I do want to emphasize that again, to Nate's point, we have so many rich cultures and diversities, and we represent so many different languages. And it's sad when we don't have an actual person to be able to interpret. Sometimes we do have to use language line, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. But as much as possible, we do everything that we can to make sure that we're supporting those families.
Thanks, Elsie.
Thank you, Val.
Elsie, what are you projecting as like caseloads? I know we said like 50% of the students coming into Langford in the kindergarten class, but what are we thinking for like caseloads for those EL educators?
So right now, I could tell you that the caseloads over at Goodwin, O'Connell, Pitkin, we have one teacher there, and we're averaging about 50 or so students.
Okay.
So, and that's high, And we also don't have tutors there. Now in our other schools, we call them elemental, Langford, Mayberry, Norris, O'Brien. Those are our elemental schools. The ones that have our highest population of bilingual education students. They hover anywhere between 80 and we just tipped over 100 at both Langford and O'Brien. And in those particular schools, they have 2 teachers, but then they also have tutors as well to be able to support that work. So it makes it more manageable. And Patrick, the other thing that we do as well is, in addition to the EL and bilingual teachers, as well as the tutors, we work extensively to build the capacity of our classroom teachers to be able to engage in the work, because we know that at the elementary level, our kiddos, that their teachers are their primary case manager, no matter what. So we have done a lot of work this year. We actually began it last year, and we continue to persist in that work. And this year in particular, we're working on an EL workshop basically for leaders, for building principals, so that they can understand look-fors and how to support their teachers within the IDT meetings, within their informal and formal observations, making sure that all of those best practices are being embedded throughout the day, not just when they're being seen by an EL or bilingual teacher.
I think it's a really important point. No way, first of all, are there enough certified EL teachers for us ever to create a caseload similar to what we talked about with special ed. At some point in East Hartford, all of our tier 1 teachers or general teachers have to become skilled EL teachers as well. And that is the kind of the task team is the EL teachers, but the larger strategy development is building these SIOP strategies or focused EL instruction strategies across our schools. It is the only way we're going to deal with this.
No other questions? Anne Marie, take it over.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about the secondary education budget, which consists of 13 programs consisting of over $15 million and representing 15.6% of the proposed budget. In this case, the secondary education program represents 4 of the middle and high schools of the overall department, as well as the alternative education program, otherwise known as Synergy, and the adult education program. In this case, there are no major budget drivers in the budget for this coming year. And I see that Ben has transitioned to the English language arts program. So when we're talking about English language arts or program 2 this year, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about. Object number 0002 or conferences. There is an increase this year, and you'll see this also come up in mathematics for attendance of the teachers in for the National Council of Teachers of English Conference. As I said, that comes up in mathematics. We have teachers that are more interested in attending conferences next year. Also, we have object number 650001 for an increase in computer supplies. And you'll see that in the next line item also, there's a change, and that's because we reclassified the line items so that it's more accurately reflects the change in computer supplies versus software licenses. In this case, there's a reduction in computer supplies and an increase in software license, again, just to more accurately depict which thing is actually a computer supply versus a software license. So there's a reduction in the computer supply line versus an increase in the software license. Moving on to mathematics, program number 3. There is an increase in the conference line item, similar to what I just talked about in in English, here in mathematics, so that teachers could attend the National Council of Mathematics conference. You'll see also here similar to what we did in English, there is a reclassification of line items, both to instructional supply line items and the software licenses, just to reflect a more accurate depiction of what actually is a instructional supply versus what is a software license. So that also appears in mathematics as what was in English language arts. Moving on to program 4, science. Here you see that in instructional supplies, there was a supply cost increase so that there are additional hands-on supply materials to align with recent curriculum revisions, specifically done at the middle school level. I know that our supervisor did work with our middle school teachers this past summer, and so that is reflected in that particular line item. Program number 5, which is social studies, there are no significant changes to this program. Okay, moving on to program number 10, which is student activities. There are a couple of changes here that I want to talk about. Object number 131010, we're talking about certified extra duty. This was adjusted based on some trend analysis that has been included from recent years, and that was reduced. Object number 340001, and that's professional contracted services. That was also reduced, and that was based on an over budgeting error from last year, so that was kind of reclassified. Object number, this is actually 3 lines in a row. You see object number 610005, object number 610006, and object number 610007. That's boys fall athletic supplies, girls fall athletic supplies, and boys winter athletic supplies. And that has to do with the shot clock installation. And that was an increase. That was divided over 3 line items, and that was is installed. That's an increase based on the installation of that the shot clock installation. Program numbers number 14, family and consumer science. There's no significant change to this program. Program number 15, business education. We also see no significant change to this program. Program 16 is technology education. Here we see supply costs increase to the instructional supplies. And this is because we are doing some reinvigoration of the wood shop program and supplies. Program number 17 is health sciences. And here we see an increase in transportation, which is object number 510002. There's a reallocation of transportation costs, which you see an increase in that line item. And this is where students actually go out into the community. We had students not going out into the community for a while due to COVID restrictions. And so here we had to increase that budget line item. And there was a reduction to a line item, the next line item, transportation vocational. And that was the reallocation of Prince and Cheney Tech bus runs. Program number 18 is alternative education, and there are no significant changes to this program. Program number 19 is adult education. There are no significant changes to this program. The variances in the individual accounts are due to the recalibration of the split between the general and between the split with general budget grants. Program number 20 is the summer school grant, and there are a couple of things that I want to highlight here. The first object line here is certified extra duty, and there is a reduction here based on the anticipated grant utilization. The second one is an actual increase of non-certified overtime and extra duties. And that's also based on adjusted anticipated grant utilization. We have a reduction into transportation, which is also a reallocation of transportation costs to match the service areas. There is also a reduction in the object line related to adult ed revenue. If you recall, we used to actually bring in revenue from other students coming in from outside districts. We no longer do that. And again, that was we stopped doing that during our COVID years. We no longer have students coming in from outside districts. Program number 27 is Gifted and Talented. The first reduction here is under transportation. Transportation is no longer practical because we have students from the 8 different elementary schools or 8 different sites. So all of our field trips now are virtual. And we have 2 other increases here. The first is to general supplies. Now they're being allocated directly to the program with a shift to an elementary school-based model. And the same rationale goes for our software licenses. Those are actually being allocated directly to the program within each elementary school. Program number 35 is our guidance or career education program. Here we have a reduction to instructional supplies. During this school year, we incurred a one-time cost for outfitting an office and account normalized. The account has been normalized for this particular upcoming school year. And then finally, program number 42, which is our media service program, we had an increase of 11% to account for the self-study program. And in this case, the self-study program required that we add some additional books so that our library media center reflected some more culturally diverse materials in our library media center at Sunset Ridge specifically. At this point, I'm happy to take any questions about the 13 programs that fall under the secondary education program.
Anne Marie, the conferences that you mentioned for the English and for the math.
Yeah.
I don't remember hearing a lot about conferences before. In the budget, does that have anything to do with the UDL?
In some cases it will. There aren't specific conferences actually right now, Doris, that are designed for UDL, but sometimes when we go to conferences, there would be sessions based on UDL. It's been a while since our teachers have attended any conferences, and sometimes we're able to cover our conferences through different budgets. So some of that really depends. And sometimes we attend conferences at the state level. They don't have to be national conferences, but I think our department supervisors put them in the budget just to kind of account for, you know, ones that come up.
Yeah.
But that's a really good question about UDL. In fact, if there was a UDL conference, I'd love to go to one myself.
All right, so that's more like professional development within, basically.
Yeah, within your content area.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
No, that's an awesome question. Thank you for asking it.
Uh-huh.
Right, so the next one is general administration. This is a catch-all, so I'll talk about, oh, go ahead, Patrick.
Patrick,
Sorry,
did you have a
Ben,
question?
I did. So I just had a general question about athletic supplies.
Sure.
Why do we spend more money on boys' athletic supplies? I mean, I know boys cost more money, so I have 3 girls personally, but why are we spending more money on boys than girls in general?
I think honestly, that's a really good question. I think if I was to guess, and I'm not the athletic director, but I think certain sports tend to cost more money, like football, for example. That program is more costly. I don't believe like sports like basketball, because there are girls and boys basketball. I would imagine the equipment costs the same, but I want to say football is more costly, and we don't have a girls football program or an equivalent. And I'm going to ask anyone else that tends to know bit more money and more information about that, but I'm guessing that is a big driver.
I'll jump in there too. Those accounts, my accounting team hates those accounts because they're split up so granularly. And then the folks that are putting in purchase orders and making purchases to those accounts, like, is it a winter sport, is it a spring sport, is it a fall sport? It doesn't matter. So we're going to start collapsing some of those accounts and hoping that maybe we just track them, girls and boys. Honestly, I don't think we should track them that way anyway. The accounts are so small. We pay for a lot of that stuff through fee-based accounts. That they really don't make sense to even track separately. It's just what the individual programs are buying. We actually do have some years where the girls' sports are more. We were doing a little trend work on those, and there's no rhyme or reason to them. So the reality is that they probably aren't even spending more.
We've had questions about this before, most famously with our softball team. At some point times our staff, in well-meaning ways, write applications on Donors Choose or put out a plea on Facebook that they have no uniforms, they have this, that, and that narrative. I understand it. It's an effort to secure funding and to bring in opportunities, but all of our programs follow a refresh cycle, and it's a refresh cycle that works its way with uniforms, with equipment, with et cetera through there. So there is no discriminatory reason or interest in separating boys from girls, Patrick.
I didn't think there was. It just year after year, it seems like we're spending, based on the data you gave us, it was like 1,000 or something more.
Yeah.
And then my other question was, I know that
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Patrick, because you started to you started to get a little bit garbled there.
Sorry about that. The other question was about library and media supplies. I know that came up in an email we just all received, and I know you responded to it, Nate. But Nate, your response was something about we went at Woodland School, or at a bunch of our schools, we went from libraries and like general libraries that classes could go to more classroom-based libraries. Can we speak a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about the libraries. Elsie, I don't know if you want to talk about libraries, classroom libraries, as a school. So you were at the high school library last night, and if you were at the high school library 10 years ago, you would have seen stacks of books in different areas. What libraries look like, including town libraries, et cetera, is dramatically different than it's been, and we're adjusting to that as well. So in our schools, one of the things, our libraries, frankly, at a certain point in time, 5, 6, 7 years ago, turned into media centers. Media centers were more prone towards having computer labs. Since we've gone one-to-one, we no longer use computer labs. So our libraries now are essentially turning towards workspaces and opportunities for kids to collaborate and work together in larger spaces. But we've really pushed our books. Most of our classrooms, all of our classrooms across our district, have classroom level libraries. The email regarding Woodland School was another great example of what I just shared with you earlier regarding your softball and sports. We had a few grants written for an alumni group. In one of the grants, one of the teachers noted that they don't have any books, et cetera. Again, we build these budgets at the school level. We communicate with the principals around what the needs of the school are. This school was Woodland School. You just went through the budget at Woodland School. You can see there was a significant investment at Woodland School that wasn't at other schools, including horseback riding opportunities. We certainly wouldn't prioritize horseback riding opportunities over libraries. There is an appropriateness level nature of libraries at Woodland School for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is there's a utilitarian concept regarding what we put in classrooms for students who have significant episodic issues and begin to throw things that are loose, such as books. So we are working with our principal. This was never brought up by our principal. I believe that this was a well-meaning, well-intentioned educator who wanted to write a grant for some multicultural books, which we're thrilled that she got. But I think the portrayal of Woodland School as a school that we haven't invested in, that couldn't be further from accurate. We are working with our principal now to look at books across the school. If there's an issue, we'll address it. You also saw the Woodland budget had a significant increase to instructional supplies. Those books would be bought through there.
Thank you.
All right, so general administration is a catch-all account. It's got a bunch of things in here that don't really fit anywhere else. So what better person to talk about that than me? So the first one to come up here is Board of Education supplies. That's a small account that funds dues, fees, board expenses, and there's no significant changes to this account. Actually, no changes at all. Next one is community services. The only change here is in community use revenue. If you remember at the top of the call, we took the fee that the town pays us for use of the pools and we moved it from miscellaneous revenue into community use revenue. Next one is central administration. So these are the offices of the superintendent, deputy superintendent, and assistant superintendents, and some miscellaneous support functions. A couple small changes here. Again, overtime, not a certified in overtime. You've seen a lot tonight. We've actually pulled money. We've right-sized a lot of our overtime and extra duty accounts. It was long overdue to do that. That counters our overall salary expense. Printing and binding. This is just the reality of what our spend is on these needs. We're just trying to right-size the budget again. And dues and fees. These are tuition contractual obligations. We minted one doctor this year, and we're on our way to minting another. So those are the tuition fees for that. Next one is principal administration. We jump to that page. This is everything. This is the discretionary funds that our principals budget for. We talked about that. Stephanie had asked that question. Principals put all their building admin expenses in there. It also funds our district-wide copier and printing program. A couple changes. One, our non-certified substitutes. Again, the next three here are our old friend trend analysis. We're going down there. Slightly up in certified extra duty and down again in non-certified OT and extra. Printing and binding, we're taking money out there. We're seeing that across the district. Our digital solutions are taking place of our printed materials. We hope that trend continues with our one-to-one device program, but we still do use a lot of paper as a district. Travel slightly down. We're just seeing lower overall trend expense or travel trends throughout the district, so we're comfortable lowering that. And dues and fees went down just because there is no International Baccalaureate visit at Sunset Ridge for fiscal year 24. They had their visit in fiscal year 25. Any questions on that exciting one? Next up is magnet schools, one of our favorite topics. We talked about this a lot last night. This here is the net expense, not the gross expense. So this is just what our district budget is burdened with. We also are expecting about $2.9 million in grants to cover this. And we also book about $550,000 to our Alliance grant as well. So these are the kids that live in East Hartford that we pay to go to 17 CREC schools, 2 Learn schools, and Hartford Public with Great Path. Transportation is also included here, as well as the drivers, like we talked about last night. We have our tuition rate increases, 14% just in CREC alone. That puts our gross cost up $885,000. Our enrollment is increasing year over year about 4%. We're hoping our Magnet Cap grant is fully funded at going from 7 to 4. That increases our grant by an estimated $1.2 million. And the overall decrease is due to the increased costs and that with the additional grant funding. So we could go into the program, and I don't think there's anything else to talk about with that one. But for completeness sake, magnet schools in our budget. Then you see transportation, that 5% increase is just strictly the contractual increase for the buses that we run. We bring East Hartford students to East Hartford resident students that attend the magnet schools in East Hartford, we pay for the transportation for them. You see tuition correct shows a decrease. Tuition for correct is actually increasing. The reason why that's going down is that's the account our magnet cap grant hits. And then you see learn is going up. That's their tuition enrollment increase. So you have to net both of those accounts together to see the savings there. That is it. Any questions on magnet schools?
Ben, so we have we have the cap. So when they increase the price, they're really not charging us, they're charging other districts. How does that work? What's the point in them raising the price?
Yep. So the way that the magnet school system works is for every kid that lives in East Hartford that goes to, let's just say, a CREC school, there are different rates depending on elementary or secondary, but let's just say it's $6,200. So we pay CREC $6,200 for every kid. We get a bill from CREC, we pay it. Now, for every kid above what now is 4% of the population of East Hartford. So say there was 1,000 kids in the East Hartford school system. You would take 4% of them, which would be 40 kids. And say you had 50 kids that went to magnet schools. So you have 1,000 kids that live in East Hartford, 4%, and 50 of them go to magnet schools. 10 of them, the 10 that are above 40, we would receive $4,400 back in the form of a grant. So it's kind of like what it's supposed to do is supposed to protect you against increased enrollment, but you only get $4,400 of that back. So the incremental cost of each additional kid that goes to a magnet school, even though the cap grant will pay us $4,400 theoretically, they don't always fund it all the way. We still have to pay the difference between the 44 and the, call it 62.
Okay.
So enrollment costs continue to matter because the larger that number gets, the more diluted the percentage of return is. So these are numbers, I look at the Goodwin University one and go, you can expect a big number next year on that one. There's no question they will increase their costs. Ben would call that forecasting. I would call it a wild hunch, but that'll be there.
So just as like a curiosity sentence, I'm going to say, as those prices are going up and they're higher than our actual tax dollars are going to, like all of our money's coming from ESSER and like different grant services and the tax base that we're getting, how does that factor in? That doesn't factor in at all, or it's just like that's the price?
No,
that's the cost.
That they're able to, they have the statutory authority to charge up to, they actually are not charging as much as they even could under the law that funds magnet schools. I forgot what that number is, but they get
about 20.
Yeah, it's about $20,000. They get about 10 or 12 from the state for each kid. Then they charge the sending district that the 6,200. They could go even. They're allowed to go even higher, which is they're creeping now. I mean, you've got 14% increase in 1 year, and they're doing a phase-in schedule right now. This is the second year of it, of double-digit increases every year. I'd love to increase our expenses double digits every year too. So it's a very frustrating subject.
The positive thing is there's going to be a bill. There was a bill last year that didn't make it through, sponsored by Jeff, was the ultimate sponsor on this. It is House Bill 5283. And the bill now will ultimately fold all magnet tuitions into one ECS formula. So we would no longer be responsible for paying that out. And the delta on it, of course, we would lose the magnet school cap grant right now, but the delta on it would still work as a positive. The good news, bad news on this is this has been an East Hartford problem for 15 years. That's the bad news. The good news is it's starting to become a major problem for other districts. Farmington never cared. South Windsor never cared. Manchester didn't care. And now as costs has gone up and enrollment has gone up to meet the chef settlement, they're starting to care and they're starting to have legislative power. So where we were screaming all by ourselves, now there's other groups screaming in Hartford about this. So our hope is that somehow this will be legislatively addressed in our favor.
Yeah, and we're headed in the right direction with that too.
Yeah.
Next up is IT.
Good evening, everyone. So the Information Technology Department currently supports over 12,000 devices, ranging from student Chromebooks and staff laptops to smart boards, and that also includes our network and server infrastructure. The department is also responsible for state reporting, Power School, data dashboards, cybersecurity, and the district phone system, and that includes all phone extensions throughout the district. Additionally, there are numerous initiatives throughout the district that do touch technology that people don't normally think of, such as the security cameras, the facility scheduling project, and time clocks. We have leveraged grants heavily over the last couple of years. The 2024 budget was developed using a thoughtful process that balanced federal grant funds and local funds. This came with an understanding that the federal funds would more than likely come to an end in 2024. And working with Ben, we decided to move all technology capital projects scheduled for fiscal year 2025, such as our infrastructure refresh cycle, into the 2024 budget, leveraging the ARP grant. This will delay the funding needed by the district for the next refresh cycle until approximately 2030. What I'd like to start with is, let me just move my paper, I'm sorry. So for non-certified substitutes, we did increase this and it's 130% or $5,095. What we did was consolidate lines 340001 and 122020. That's a small part of the increase, but along with that, we realized that doing the infrastructure projects all at once, we're going to need vendors who can help us do some of the configuration and the installation. So we increased this account. Also, this funds our summer interns that help our techs work to repair or refresh close to 9,000 devices in the district. Staff development, like several of the other programs that went before me, that's up 81% or 8,500. That's due to an increase in the needs of support for our technology team, training in several key areas. That includes sending 2 people to Power School University to attend classes that will allow them to return and add value to reporting and requests. We haven't done this in probably 4 years, 5 years, I think it was before I was here. And then COVID hit when we were thinking of doing it again. So we need to send them down so they could have better training with Power School. I believe the high school is doing something similar with a couple of their staff members. We also have a subscription to an online product for our department, which allows them to train on their own time and keep up with newer technologies. Next is repairs and maintenance. We were able to reduce that by 19% or 33,500. And that's due to the amount of wiring that we've already done to increase our wireless access points throughout the district. And that's through the demand for the Chromebooks. We had to increase that quickly. We used a lot of E-rate funds and some local funds and ARP funds, ESSER funds to do that. So we believe there'll be less of a demand in 2024. Communications and networks were also reduced. That was by 12% or 53,636. And that was due to an RFP process through our E-rate, which reduced rates for our fiber service, and that provides connectivity from building to building and to the internet. Travel has been increased by 163% or $13,000, and that's to pay for Power School University for the 2 staff. Same with the conferences. That's increased by 100%, and that's to be used by the Power School attendees. General supplies have been increased. We continue to monitor and analyze what we're spending for repairs to Chromebooks and laptops, and also classroom devices such as smart boards and phones. And we think that we've come to a pretty good number for that. We will see. And equipment technology was increased by 34% or $59,466. And that's to partially fund the refresh cycle, which we are using grant funds as well, but we needed to subsidize with some of the local funds. Software technology has been reduced by 43% or $252,180. That's to offset some of the hardware needs in the equipment technology line. And we will utilize American Rescue Plan funds to subsidize the local budget. The caution here is that in 2025, we will need to fund all the software currently utilized by the district. I expect the technology and the software equipment to probably double our budget in 2025. And this is going to be an inverse effect almost. E-rate funding was reduced by 12% or $44,829 due to the fact that what happens with the E-rate is we get a bucket of money for 5 years, and we're allowed to spend it on approved projects. So instead of using the monies now, we're using the grant funding, and then that'll leave us in 24 and 25 to be able to start using some of the E-rate funds again. I expect less to use in 24 and more in 25. So then we receive less funds because we've spent less funds through E-rate. And that is technology. If anyone has any questions.
I can't stress enough the ARP conversation here, and I know we're rightfully very concerned regarding ARP and our staffing one that we went into our first driver, but this technology hurdle is a big one. And that's a reality we are going to have to really think deeply about. So that should be a question in everyone's mind.
I will add that we continue to have conversations, and I'll speak with cabinet members and whoever's requesting certain software just to make sure that everyone understands that in 2024, the funding ends and we need to be able to fund initiatives. So there have been a lot of conversations on the equipment that we're purchasing. How long will it last? Do we need it? Is it something we can sustain? That's been a big conversation in every purchasing conversation.
All right, last one, human resources.
Last but not least, we are small, but we are mighty here. So you can see we have a very small portion of the budget, just 1.8% of the total budget. I think you all know what human resources does. We do the hiring and recruitment. I do all of the labor management negotiations and just day-to-day management of our unions, and the issuance of discipline if appropriate, and overseeing our substitute services. And that line item as well. And that's really what drives my budget, because over $1 million of my budget is the substitute costs. So what you're going to see is there's two budget drivers in my accounts. One is an increase to our substitute line item, and the other is records digitization, and I'm going to speak to that in a moment. So when you look at our line items, the professional contract services line item is increasing $25,000. That is for Kelly Services. That is our substitute provider. They provide us substitute teachers, but also substitute secretaries, substitute paras. And then we use a few different other agencies for substitute nurses, and we hire our own behavior managers and custodians for subs. But all of those are coming out of this line item. And we're just increasing that because we haven't had to increase some of the daily rates for those subs because the state minimum wage has increased. So it's going up to $15 an hour. We currently pay our substitute teachers $130 a day. So when you divide that by 8 hours, that is $16.50. So we're not paying the substitute teachers a lot, but we are somewhat competitive. That is sort of the going rate in the area for a daily substitute. So it's not that we're behind, but just to give you some perspective, and that may be part of our struggle of why we haven't been able to see the fill rate like it used to be as costs have increased in inflation and whatnot. Software licenses, this is an increase. This is our digitization. I have a hard time saying that one. What we're doing here, we're using some of the ARP money to transfer all of our personnel files to be digital personnel files. So we have many file cabinets in central office with personnel files. You can imagine with 1,300 employees, we have a lot of file cabinets of their personnel files. We're going to undertake that initiative. We're actually kicking that off this Friday. To begin the process of boxing up our personnel files. They're going to all be scanned and digitized, and then we need to pay a service to maintain them on a cloud service. So that'll be an ongoing annual fee to maintain those available to us electronically, and that's 20,000 of this account. The other 5,000 is just a reclassification of software into the software licenses, software technologies into the software licenses category. That's really it for my budget. There's not a lot here, but just wanted to provide that quick explanation for you.
Nate, you want to finish it off?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to finish it off. So, obviously our budget, when we talked about yesterday, 4 major themes. There's not going to be a pop quiz on this theme, but we're proud of this budget. We're proud of a budget that maintains current services for our district. We're proud of a district that adds services towards areas we've identified as high need areas. We're extremely proud of a budget that recognizes the financial context of our town and maintains an ability to work collaboratively with our town and our taxpayers to find a budget that is palatable and reasonable for East Hartford. In that, this includes several really important mitigation efforts. Effort number one is the inclusion of grants, the use of ARP grants, the use of alliance grants, and of course, the structural prepay of OPEB. You know, item number three for us that we don't want to miss here is obviously the concept of the looming ARP question. And, you know, we bring that up as kind of just a placeholder for you because this budget doesn't solve that problem, but this budget continues to bring this problem forward. And, you know, point number four is that this is a budget that that fulfills where we're trying to go and fulfills alignment to our mission and vision. So, you know, with that, I appreciate all the work that my team has put into this. I thought the team did a phenomenal job explaining your account items. I also have really appreciated the questions. You know, working through a budget process is kind of a primer for understanding a district. So these conversations typically take us many times into off-budget items, but really good. If you want to understand a district, understand the budget of a district. And I do appreciate the engagement. I hope these themes showed up. I hope you were able to make the connection between the 9 drivers that Ben went through last night and how they played into the program details. And Chairman Harris, we turn it back to you to answer questions, and then we can talk about next steps.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for this presentation. Board members, are there any questions for the administration? Okay. Hearing none, then Nate, want to walk us through the next steps?
Yeah, so the next steps for us is we'll come back to the table and we will work towards the superintendent's budget will disappear, and we'll work towards producing the board's proposed budget. So Ben, can you take us through the timelines on that, what they should expect, what they'll see, and kind of where we're going?
Sure. Yes. So first item for the record is the board's decision if you want to cancel our meeting that we just had a placeholder on for next week. We normally schedule that meeting just in case we need a continuation of tonight's meeting. So Chairman, if you want to make that call.
Yeah, if does anyone feel the need to have an additional budget session with the administration?
I think Doris wants to have that meeting.
I see that finger, Doris. So hearing none, we're all set. Let's cancel that meeting then.
So what we do now is we'll prepare a summary to go to our board meeting on the 12th, I believe it is this year. So we'll present this budget to you in a public format again. We don't go through this whole thing again. It's just a one-page, just announcing to the public what our budget number is, what some of our major cost drivers are. We just provide a cover letter, and hopefully that'll pass with the board. If it does, basically the next day we publish it on our website as the board's approved budget or board's proposed budget, and then we transmit that to the town. The town the town does their budget process a little bit later than ours. They aggregate our number essentially as a line. Our 98 million goes in as a line item on their budget. And then Nate and I and Chairman Harris will present to the board or to the town council. Usually it's in February. And we just basically give our pitch for our 2.3% increase, and that hopefully stays with them, and they adopt it as part of their town budget adoption process. Then it comes back to the board in April, and that's your final stamp saying, hopefully the town hasn't altered it, and you're able to adopt your budget as you presented it to the town.
So things as board members you should continue to, we would encourage you to discuss is the narrative around this budget is the same narrative we've talked about for many years, that we've been fortunate to achieve this. This is a budget that preserves the programs of our town and keeps our district moving forward. There's an easy one-liner, hashtag, whatever you want to call it. This is a budget that recognizes the position of East Hartford, the grand list in East Hartford, the taxpayer dollars, the tax requirements of taxpayers in East Hartford, and responsibly addresses that. And then, number three, I think as board members is we do need to keep an eye on the contingencies that we've really tried to talk about. The assumptions here, obviously, our woodland revenues holding where they are right now. The assumptions here are being able to prepay the $900,000 of OPEB, which we expect to do. the assumptions here are trying to maintain the current fiscal year budget of fuel costs, et cetera, and all those things we're dealing with. Not raising those as things I'm overly concerned about, but those are things that obviously we need to achieve. So I hope you talk about this budget with your neighbors and your constituents and your friends. And I hope that you can pitch this as a budget that you're really proud of, because we are. And you know, I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation. A lot of the conversations we had tonight are conversations that we should really make sure we're continuing to have. And you know, we do have. So let's keep those going on. So for cabinet teams, is there anything else anyone wants to say on this? Ben, thanks for all your work on this. Chairman Harris, back to you.
Yeah, again, thank you everyone for participating last night. Again, thank you for participating this evening. Thank you for just overall presenting a budget that we can present to the community. Again, holding services and a solid budget overall. So again, appreciate all the efforts around this. And with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, all.